I'll come when you're ready. I'll write. Yeah. Yeah, I do. Tested negative for everything on the sun, but it might be hard to speed or something. But I'm good. We're not live yet, huh? No COVID, no AMD. Didn't stop me from working, but no pneumonia. Certainly the law counts. Was under the weather counts. All right, good afternoon. Apologize for the informality of my both dress and facial hair. I'm not growing a beard by any means. As I was telling Mr. Fowler, I had been feeling a little bit under the weather, but I do feel much better. We got a pretty healthy agenda to get through today. Just want to wrap up some things from our council meeting on Tuesday, which I thought was very well handled by Madam President. I was part of coining a few weeks ago at an event. And her and I see you back there. And her accomplishment as the first African-American woman president of our council. And I wanted to let her know that I did appreciate and note the way she handled her meeting. And I know Mr. Gary Johnson sitting next to her did as well, because everyone was having a practice having the formality of the items read by the parliamentarian, who's of course the clerk, and then asked for a motion and vote. I think that on balance, those things are good. I think that the meetings themselves, we all in life, you don't have to be overly formal when people are moving things and getting along and everybody gets things done. I think those are the right way, but the formality of reading things in the record and taking those votes helps everybody, because it puts everybody on the same page and playing field. And I think that is part of what Madam President Perry was seeking to do in both longer term conversations with her, should she have assumed leadership, and hearing from her before and after. And so I want to just say, boy, that looked good and was the right way, I think, to handle it. And thank you.
Thank you.
I think it will be a good way to move forward. The way procedures can be set up, it allows room for the disagreement and everything that people need to be able to do. We have a saying in the South, I'm certain it's everywhere, but I hear it a lot here, especially you don't have to disagree disagreeably, and certainly that is accomplished through proper procedures and handling of meetings. I know there's still a little bit of stuff from the audience that gets far afield, particularly when the minutes are up for adoption, and hopefully we'll continue to work through those. And I know that the council is aware and provides leniency where it thinks it needs to keep the meetings going. So with that, the first item on the list was the selection of community service events, vendors, and entertainment. I felt like we gave a pretty fulsome answer at council, but I did promise a few things. One is the report of February 21st, 2023. I've stated that last year, roughly at this time, it was a little later next month, we had given a report on precisely the same, and it was to do with the same things. That title was to consider final adoption of an ordinance authorizing the mayor to promote the city of Alexandria by entering into all contracts with bands and or vendors for downtown rocks, Riverfest, Rockin' on the Red, and Winterfest, Rockin' on the Red and Winterfest in 2023. So you can see in that title, it was even more specific. It had just the list of events. And I think that was part of perhaps why Ms. Corley sent it a little broader, was to cover the Downtown Rock series and other similar things. But it was limited to bands and vendors. And it had the clause of, and those things related there too, which I think caused some consternation, at least by one member, one lawyer member who asked about that clause. The clause is in almost everything that the council does, and it's because there are so many things that go with it. I gave a few examples from sound and other things that go with band that are needed to promotional matters, DJs, other things that might not fall exactly the definition of band or vendor. But I would just point out that clause is necessary. Mr. Gist is probably somewhere here. It's considered a proper practice to put in ordinances in case you limit yourself so that you don't have challenges afterward to those. But again, there are multiple ways for the council to have its proper oversight. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm going to put this report, there's no record to place and we're not in a meeting, but I'm going to give this to Donna today. So it's another one and it keeps with our promise to do that. The report in 2023 would be the same as today. To ensure inclusion and thoughtful community participation regarding recreation, the administration provided that special report. That report, as I recall, was a request from Cynthia Perry about things last year to go over just these same issues. And we had that same talk last year that this would not cover other professional services or anything else that the city does, but only those things related to these events. And so we spent some time in that report going over the rules. All contracts must be authorized by ordinance. Contracts with bands fall under this overall rule. That is derived from the charter at section 212, subparagraph 16. Normally, each contract would be subject to an ordinance as a matter of practice. In Alexandria. Planning for event series, the series as we run, calls for budget authority so that quote unquote deals with various bands and vendors can be made ahead of time. So Gary Johnson goes through this with us a lot because he comes from military purchasing and budgeting, which is different. In some ways, the opposite of the city because things carry over a different way. In fact, in the military, you can be punished if you don't spend your budget amount in the year. And so I think he's always concerned that with the end, it will hurt, but ours ends, period. It's a new rollover for anything in operating, no matter what. So I think there's some concern that is alleviated by the fact that, remember, we start a new operating budget every year, and these festivals fall just after. So we don't have the authority, not knowing what the council has placed in a line item, so we need to have that nimbleness, if you will, or at least some flexibility once there's a budget line item passed to make the deals with the different bands. And we're going to get into how you have the oversight that you may want from a policy level. The council could never negotiate band contracts. I'm going to go over a lot. It's just very practical stuff that would never make sense. And the council, frankly, doesn't have the legal authority to do it. The mayor has to do it. And you couldn't have the authority to sign, et cetera, other than by council permission. It would never make sense for individual council members. You'd have 7 band discussions and it wouldn't work. And I think I can show that easily and why no one else does it anywhere. Even Larson Act cities would not do it that way. We had a commission form years ago. You had 3 commissioners, and they each did each thing. And the people roundly rejected it for this exact reason, because they were constantly in battle over who could do what. So there was a utilities commissioner, I think, a mayor commissioner, and a streets and what might be like public works. It was a mess. And anyone can go do their research and look at that. It was not the system. There was also an opportunity for what's called a council manager system or a strong council system. That too was rejected when the people voted in favor of a mayor council system. So for those who think, well, it's the mayor, it's not. The council has the absolute power of the purse. The most powerful thing there is the control of money. The council also has the authority to authorize every contract and every obligation that the city takes on or doesn't. Only the council can do that. The council can set the general policy of the city on how things are complied with. How does it do that here? Through a fee, an ordinance of the council setting the policy of how we contract and deal with the things that we had some concerns asked about the other day. So it's all working exactly as it should, Madam President. And then people would be able to provide other oversight, as I'll outline, in some thoughtful and good ways. One is through mayoral commissions that have to be approved. Again, what's the check and balance? The mayoral commission's established by the mayor, but guess who has to approve the members? The advice and consent of the council. The persons that I appoint as division heads who run the administrative side, what is the council's authority? The advice and consent and approval of the council for those persons. And then the ultimate power, if you don't like it, there's a budget line item that applies to everything. I'm not saying you can apply it to a salary write-out. That's a whole different set of questions, how that works, but certainly to programming and adding programming, deleting programming, doing new programming, et cetera. These are all carefully set forth checks and balances. And there's a reason they're set up that way. They are set up so that not one branch of government can so-called lord over the other unfairly. And that is our system. Mr. Gist and I years ago used to laugh. There was an old saying that every mayor wants to be the king and every council member the mayor. So there's this constant natural tension that occurs. Sure, there is always that in city council and mayor relationships that the mayor wishes that there was less oversight and the council wishes that they could make more individual decisions. I welcome any oversight that is meaningful that you want to provide. I'm not in a position in life where I would be worried about that in any way. I think what we're doing is good work together. I think that was exemplified by the meeting 2 days ago, and I think we'll continue to have that relationship. Myron Lawson used to say, "You're the quarterback" to me. So if there's a quarterback, there's also a coach, an ownership group, and everything else. We all have an ownership group, the people out there. Those are your investors, that's your ownership group, and we've got to answer to them. If you want to do it as a corporation, they're the shareholders, not us. And they can dictate certain things. You would be the board, I'd be, I guess, the CEO. And that's what the charter exactly says, that the mayor is the chief executive. So I hope that we can start this time in a good way. I would add too, Madam President, that there should be no excuse not to, because for the first time in a long time that I can remember, certainly this time coming back, and I think I can say safely for Mr. Hall, these are all veteran members. So these are either returning past serving council members and now members who have served long enough where there are no new members, in the sense that they should not know how it works, nor are there people in administration that you shouldn't hold the same to. They should also know how things are supposed to work properly. So again, back to that head of time. This ordinance that you pass simply allows Tanya and her team to make these deals when they come due in the next few months, which are going to be important. Large continuing festivals are unique in the planning, in that the planning for them, especially budgeting, is based on multiple considerations, not the least of which is contracting with bands and vendors. I'm again reading from the report last year. Festivals we know will be repeated or subject to regular intervals or as a series or have a yearly plan of work, require many small agreements that must be executed. Guys, these are tens upon tens of agreements, from green room activity to everything else that happen all over the city. These items are budgeted for by the city, and so unlike a contract for, say, a professional service or large project, these agreements can properly be pre-authorized by ordinance. You've done that 2 or 3 years in a row, I suspect. You did it when Jeff was mayor, and I know we started some version of this all the way back when I was mayor before. It used to be roughly that we'd have to come down, and if some of you recall, Mr. Fowler, you have to come down and you'd be 2 weeks out. When I first became mayor, I can remember post-event ratifying trade already happened situations. That is improper. This is something you need to avoid. You cannot properly. You can, but you run into a question of whether you had a proper legal obligation to do that thing if you're passing an ordinance after the event occurred. Also, to make sure it was done right when I first came in and do that, I used to make you guys do a resolution, which you can't adopt money by resolution, but a resolution say you approved of the activity and introduce the ordinance ordinance title just to catch it. I got rid of that in about a year, we were done. We don't do that anymore. It's a terrible practice. If you said, well, what if there was an emergency? The law provides for that. For an emergency ordinance, it doesn't have the layover time. So the layover time is important because it gives the public the time to weigh in. You introduce the ordinance, you're not supposed to discuss it, it lays over. An ordinance authorizes money and obligations and contracts, et cetera. A resolution is essentially the announcement of your will, right? So they have a different legal impact on the citizens and home administration, especially. Resolution might adopt something that's put out for bid. We approve of this. It takes the ordinance for the contract and everything else. So you may set up a resolution in these community events. You could pass a resolution that says we want the event to mirror this or accomplish some goal, et cetera, that gives us some parameters to go about doing it. And those are all proper. Our big events, of course, are the FET series. They're limited but large events. We do the Rock in the Red, and we have the Downtown Rock series. Many of you, I won't name names because there are some council members that may not go to events and there are some that go to everything. And I would say, I'll just single out Madam President. She's on the hot seat today and say she goes to the events. She checks out what's happening in the city. I believe that if you look at AFEE and its report, I know y'all see y'all point to other members, but who are here, but just to use one so I don't get the problem of not counting all, you can visually see what our festivals look like, who vends at those festivals, who's getting business, etc. And of course, we account for that in AFEE. My staff is required to. And we are living in a time, ladies and gentlemen, where there is a lot of consternation and flux about that. If anyone hasn't been following the news, the President of the United States has declared that all DEI policy in the country as pertains to the federal government has ended. Our AFEE program has, you can read it, how it's set up in the goals. Our city is a majority minority city. We have important goals to make people feel included and make people feel that they're given a fair stake and opportunity in business. And you can do that by still selecting the right people, the best people for everything, if you just cast the net and make sure that you're giving people a fair shot, making the playing field even and equal, giving that opportunity. Our charter also requires that. Most people don't realize that, but the boards, the appointments, everything I do, there's a little known section in it that says it should reflect the socioeconomic and other backgrounds of the city. I understand someone could argue that federal law can sue. I get all of that. It's so easy to move toward what's right by just applying yourself, Mr. Crutchfield, as we know, toward fairness and doing the right thing. We will always perhaps have someone say it should be more, it could be more, everything. There's nothing wrong with that either. That should be debated, and that's a healthy thing for a community to do. But yes, sir.
You brought up the president. DEI, I think we are missing the point of DEI. A lot of people do not know what DEI stands for. For example, I will be DEI because I'm a veteran and I get a 10-point preference because of my time in the military. Now that's used as DEI. That's a form of DEI, and people do not realize that.
Let me state what Mr. Gary Johnson, who's a council member, is stating. He's pointing out that some people don't understand the full ramifications of DEI. And I'm not trying to pull y'all into a political conversation today, but we can stay on the, we are all adults here. We know how to talk through this. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is what the acronym stands for. Mr. Johnson, who's former military, or is pointing out that if he were to apply or go for a contract or do something, that he would get a military purpose. So there may be points at it. So there are lots of versions of this. It's a very packed question about how it all works. And I've had some pretty detailed ones from a legal standpoint from this dais on it, and we'll be happy to do that again, how some of the case law has changed, what is happening, what can be expected. I just want everyone to know that we are all and have to be keenly aware of where national policy is and may move and what we're doing here at home. And they're not necessarily in any way mutually exclusive in that we can't continue to do the things that we need to do to make our city better. After all, to grow the pie for everyone, to give everyone the opportunity to contribute, pay taxes, and make the city better is good for the whole city. At a local level, that's the goal, to have people working and participate. So I will just say, from my staff appointments to what we do, I'm happy to put up what I do against anyone. I'm proud of the work that we do. I'm proud of the work we do with women-owned business, minority-owned business, minority women-owned business, and other small business. But I get that that's become such a touchy phrase that can be offensive to someone. Someone will see this tonight and say the mayor is DEI crazy, and it'll be a whole thing. I get that, and I don't care. I'm okay with that. Because the people here that we work with and what we have to do to make our community better, I can live with the criticism of that. I do not think that anything passed at the national level stops AFEE, because AFEE was carefully written when it was to avoid exactly that application. And so we will have been pretty prescient back then in how it was done. So by queuing up bands, et cetera, we mean that headliners at the top of a queue, Tanya, have to be thought way out. And so I just want the council to know that we're not excuse making of why we have to do this. You have a budget that ends in a new year starts, and then we have to start thinking about it. There would be no way for council members to negotiate or do that. Plus, to be honest, council members may have a different view and role of what they're doing. A council member may be talking to someone they know, but I'm gonna get you this gig. And so they're pushing for the top. They're pushing the pay to be whatever. Our job is to find the bands at the best price we can that fit our city's goals for a community event. You gotta have one negotiator, Mr. Johnson, as you know. And that negotiator is not me. Felt there was a little bit of that at the meeting that the mayor decides this, so you. In fact, I heard the pronoun you over and over. I do not do it. Most of the people in the group that look at our bands are here. So I'm going to ask Ms. West, would you stand up? Ms. Lisa Harris participates in this. Ms. Tanya Corley is the division head. Dr. Skip Fox, I don't know if Skip is in here, participates. Michael Caffrey, Angie Gio is out. Angie probably overly participates as much as anybody can possibly do it. Lee Gwynn ran it last year. In the past, some of the larger making all the bands work. I don't know what you call that role. Matt Ransom did it. The overall sound guy, that kind of thing. We're not talking about little sound stuff. We're talking about coordination of the bands, building stages, etc. I said that there were other consultants that we may pay for other things, but kind of donate time here. Kinetics has always done that. Obviously, they get paid for other things, but there are people who help build these festivals that are consultants now, but who did it at different times in different ways, donating time. There are employees of the city, Mr. Fowler, who get paid to come outside of their normal role to help, but there are other employees who just do it. People really participate big in that. So, Madam President, I just wanted you to know, those are the mostly ladies, and certainly you can't say lack diversity, who are deciding about bands. But it's not an easy job, because as we talked about, I saw Mr. Johnson acknowledge during that meeting, you've got to pick music in the family-driven festivals, which are the two FETs, that both draw a cultural diversity and create a safety net that it's a family event. That does not mean that every event can't be for young people, be more edgy, do other things. That's this event. That's a different event. Now I will say, the events where people could use City Hall, et cetera, to charge for money selling alcohol out of City Hall, doing bands, having it essentially use this building for the purpose of solely a private enterprise involving alcohol, et cetera, is a safety problem for the city. And we don't do that anymore. There were a few. And in each of the cases that those events were allowed when I came in, there were terrible consequences. Fights, injuries, destruction of property. There are lots of private venues where you can go rent to do that. I suspect people were decidedly against that because we charge so little here and there was less oversight and we're providing security and other things. But that's not a proper public purpose or public use to allow someone else to make money off public property with that risk. Could you do it 10 years ago? Ms. Perry, maybe. Could you do it 5 years ago? We're going to talk a little bit about that for a minute, where we are today. Part of the job of that team that stood up is to mitigate risk. I couldn't break it all down in front of you the other day, but I've had some time to think about it. And perhaps in a time where gross transparency is needed more than ever, let's lay it out. We have to think about bands, how they work together, how the symmetry will work, how we create everybody being able to be together, how the transitions occur, what time you put on what acts. I say, look, everybody's nodding on my team because they know what I'm talking about. We had an act that Mr. Johnson and I enjoy a lot, and that act came on in a time where it started to get later, and probably there was a little bit of turn in the crowd, and we have to watch that. Because it gets later, people have had alcohol, et cetera, and we have to pay attention to all of that. And all of you know we did. If you didn't think we did, look at where we are today. You could look at New Orleans, you can look elsewhere. But we're going to talk a little bit about the new challenges coming. So we're very careful about those things. There can be other events that are more highly secure that can be edgier events, right? So if you want to have different levels of entertainment, note that probably should be more private sector than public purpose city sector for the first part. And the second part is, while we can partner, participate, that's got to be run very differently. So you think about a coliseum in a place that's designed to be secure. People have to go through certain doors. There are security measures. Our events have been open events, wide open events. We have a different set of security risks if we're not careful about everything from bands to band transition times to everything else. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not easy at all, actually. But I can tell you that that group spends weeks doing that. And if any of you ever see them, they literally will watch bands. They go research, have they had any incidents? They look at different times they played at different times in the evening. They really do a lot of prep work and think about it. That's not my role. I don't do that. So that's their role. I have one mantra I tell them every year, which I'll tell any of you in private, but it has very little to do with anything other than make it fair, make the headliners fair, make the pay fair, make sure that you're achieving our goals. That's it. I've enjoyed the music the last few. I thought this year was good. I think that there was some press to get a band I think y'all would have enjoyed more, but sometimes we're on to something and it changes. Boy, I hate to be specific, but we thought we had Midnight Star one night and we got, things can change. And that's why I need y'all to know that you can think you got a band and it can change. We thought we had the Revivalists, and we watched them launch we were one of the first big venues they played all those years ago. They're huge. And thought we had them at a special price because we reminded them that we were one of your first. Please give us the courtesy, and we got a Jazz Fest is a better place to play this weekend. And we compete with that, right? We're on the Jazz Fest. We're one of the weekends of Jazz Fest. But it's still the proper time. So just understand, we're open to any ideas of things you guys want, but when you tell us, we can go after it. but it may not always work out, and we have to keep that balance. You can look at the band series in the page last time, we have that, the data, we're happy to put it up, we're proud of it. All right. There is a legend that is in your report that you're getting that goes on everything that we do about purchasing, contracting, vending, and recreation. That legend is in this report, and certainly is something that is promoted. These are the community events in 2024. January 15th was MLK celebration. February 9th through 11th was Mardi Gras and the events with that association. February 17th was we co-sponsored Black Angels over at Tuskegee at Coughlin. March 16th, we co-sponsored the Junior League Kids Fest at Franco Hunter. March 21st, downtown Ross was Johnny Earthquake. March 23rd, co-sponsored PFLAG Health Fair at Convention Hall. March 24th, we co-sponsored Mu Eta Sigma of Sigma Gamma Rho Youth Symposium. March 27th, Women in Law Enforcement. April 3rd, Youth and Teen Center Kickoff. April 3rd, Soccer Camp partnering with LSUA at Big Island. April 4th, Downtown Rocks with Rouge Crew. April 5th, Friday Night Hoops at Franco Hunter. April 12th, we co-sponsored the American Cancer Society Relay. We're going to talk about runs in a minute. Another new set of issues for our old easy event. Used to be the easiest thing in the world to partner with somebody doing a run. World has changed. We co-sponsored on April 20, Sickle Cell Anemia Run, Walk, and Health Fair at Franco Hunter. April 12, the Rapid Symphony Orchestra, Pops in the Park. April 27, Clean Out's Love the Boot Week. May 2 through 4, Riverfest. May 18, Can and Sinlaw India Association Holy Fest. A big and very diverse and beautiful event that Amy Pilosetti and the Indian community put on for us. May 24, Party in the Park at City Park. June 7 through 8, we co-sponsor Sinlaw Pride, RRC. June 17 through 21, Journalism Camp. Now we're in the camps we were asked about. June 17 through 21, there was a journalism camp at Youth and Teen. June 24 through 28, the Public Safety Camp at Public Safety Complex. July 4th, Rock the Red. We're going to come back to that. The things you saw, we hardened our resources for the first time at that event. It's a night event. You know people are drinking that day on July 4th. We did the first hardening of crowd control. Mr. Johnson, the city's done today. So we had anticipated that those changes were coming, and then New Orleans occurred and confirmed that we're going to have to even do more. That was our first test run at using perimeter control as opposed to open air events at the city. Vets have still been open air. I suggested to you at your meeting that cannot continue. That's hard to hear. You don't want to hear that about your town, your city, your community, or anything. Healthy Living Camp was July 8th through 12th at the Incubator. Invention Convention, the STEM Camp was July 15 through 19. Back to School Bash, July 18. July 22 through 26, Financial Literacy Camp. So, Ms. Perry, when people say we're not doing camps and events for kids to learn and have involvement, it's just not true. How many different children can do the camps?
I think I should have that. Probably 25 per camp, so,
So that's,
and that's unique.
I thought I remembered a
Some
couple,
of the camps were a bit larger.
a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
So you gotta be relative to that. Somebody can say, well, that's not enough, but it's not. But as some of you point out, it's because people aren't participating. You gotta get these kids there and we're happy to do it. We can't handle more. But that's from a lot of advertising and a lot of getting it out there. That's what we had. So maybe it's not enough, but I can tell you this, that's more than any camps that I've seen before. If you looked at LSUA's camp, that's more, we did a whole lot, we moved a lot more kids. Now, we need to partner with LSUA, who does a STEM style camp, and others, and try to increase that. And we don't need to duplicate or over. If someone else is doing something, we need to think about how to make us work together, not compete with something that's a good camp. If there's a good camp happening somewhere else, we ought to be enveloping that with our ability to serve, not trying to compete. These guys think about all that stuff. I want you to know that. Cheatham basketball court dedication, you were there, August 24 party in the park at Cheatham, October 2nd through 3rd, Alexandria Business Summit, October 5th, tennis camp, October 12th, co-sponsored Christus Cabrini Glow for the Girls, the 18th, co-sponsored Arts Council Art Ball, Fall Art Ball, the 19th of October, Zubu, the 26th, Boo at Bringhurst, first inaugural year of that, wonderful, hot air, it was unbelievable, wonderful deal for kids. November 16, baseball softball camp with LSU 8, the youth complex, November 16, co-sponsored Girls on the Run, December 5 through 7, Winterfest. That's 1 year of activities. That's a lot of activities when we hear that we don't have any. And that doesn't count all the other activities going on where we're partnering, or there are private runs, private events, and other things going on. We're also going to give you our call charges, of course, the money. So here's going to be our youth and teen center. We're going to give you the hours of everything and all the sports facility usage so that you have all the information on those in addition to that report. All right. Any questions about any of that? So, we want to encourage, if you guys want to wait, let me go over this too. So there's another way that you can weigh in on the policy side. You have your 8 feet on the requirement side, but if you say, well, Mr. Mayor, we really would like to weigh in more on the programming side. Even if we accept it, you're right, your people do the programming, and I'll go through that if we need to. How do we weigh in? Through our AREP commission. We've appointed it. Where was your power over that? You had to approve the members. We need to get them going. That is a place where the entire community and you can weigh in on the cultural and other events. Once the policy are established through that and the other things we do, it is the division director under our charter who is charged with the day-to-day operation. That is written in the charter. And it is elsewhere written in 3 different places that is an executive and administrative function. It is not a legislative function. And you can read 100 AG opinions and cases and everything else. Legislators don't make the day-to-day decision because a legislator is 1 vote. You act through 4 votes. You act in that policy. You decide money, you do those things. But legislators don't direct employees. The charter prohibits that. So we want to have that participation. But in the past, if we have 7 different people telling what crews to go where, obviously the city would not work, and that is why it is set up the way it is. And so are most other governments that are here work that way at the state and federal level. The legislature has a role and we have a role, and I think we know it makes sense, but the legislators don't pick the bands as a single member. Does the legislator have the right, and can they say, I'd love to see y'all get so-and-so? Of course. Look, we won't always be able to do something if your negotiation strategy is to announce from the dais, we want you so bad, we'll pay anything. That's not how you negotiate, and that's not how it should ever work. And I've seen that too. That's the worst way to negotiate. If someone thinks that they can go in front of the council, then that's what they're gonna try to do. And that is not the council's function. I'm not gonna a whole legalistic approach to go back over like we used to have to do. I'm not gonna do it, Mr. Fowler. I'm gonna trust that we're good on that. But you have those ways to win: budgetary power, policy-making power, commission power. Those are the ways to weigh in. All right. I'm going to move off rec if y'all don't mind, unless there are other questions. I'm going to go through and cover much more quickly than all of that: flood protection and infrastructure, public safety updates, and major budget amendment and budget. And that's going to be very short. So before I move on, anything on recreation? Yes.
So for the folks that may not know, would you mind telling them what AFEE stands for?
Well, our AFE program is in an ordinance that was passed in Trey 2010.
Yes.
I know who wrote most of it. The AP program allows us to set legal goals and measurements that every division head and department head has to report its bona fide efforts to make sure they are seeking out qualified and diverse participants in vending, procurement, professional service agreements, et cetera. Where I think the most consternation that the council gets is the large bidded jobs are not part of AFI because they're closed bids. We don't have control over that. However, we've gone over this. What is part of AFI is the capacity building side to get people to know about when you can bid, to get people able to bid if they've had challenges to be ready to bid. All of those things can be very helpful. And to create a directory of people that know to go look, here's where the bids are and here's how to do it. That Alexandria sort of Fairness Act that we did is a piece of a much larger set of activities. We tend to call it AFI, but really AFI is a component of the whole diversity in action series. There's a whole set of things. There's Close the Gap Park and all of that. There was incubator activity. There was all those things. At one time, we had a financial intermediary activity where you're talking about getting people help with microloans that fall under where a bank would commercially do it, but where you're not going to a loan shark, right? Where you meet certain goals. And we even had a bonding initiative that we never had to get off the ground, Trey, because the state was sponsoring a bonding initiative to get people ready to take on big jobs. We need to look at that again, perhaps. But that whole set of things was done all those years ago. One of the major components was the balance between creating the diversity side versus making sure that you're feeding people who feed your own. So you have to ask some hard policy questions. Are you trying to get a Houston or an Austin company whose kids and family members and everybody in their satellite of worlds goes to and spends money in Austin to get a job here and take your money out because you're creating this opportunity? Or is there some kind of limitation on geography that you want to make sure that you're keeping people fed local? And the council back then, who was majority minority for sure, run council said, no, we want some geographical limitation. You want me to be frank in how to say it? We'd rather, if Mr. David is going to get it because he's local and participating in our community and spending money here, that's better than someone who may meet some other qualification we're seeking, getting it in another state. Those are questions that you have to ask if you're being serious about how this all works. And so we talk about that. Ms. Harris, who runs our HR, we have this talk every staff meeting. There's a talk, probably just about half this time, about these things that we do. We take it seriously. So AFID's a big part of our lives. We're not back where we had it when we left, we feel like, but it will be, and it will be short. And if I had to tell you, Cynthia, the main challenge is getting that directory and getting that knowledge base back. It's actually the most simple disconnection causing us the most trouble, is that participation. We've had one meeting in our series that went very well at, what is it called now? The River. It used to be Section J. What is it called now?
Riverview Room?
The Riverview Room used to be Section J of the residential. Instead of only do the Section J. But anyway, we had a great series there, and we're going to have quite a few more. There's one coming for this special month of February that we're going to be announcing shortly. All right. Anything else? Okay. Flood protection. So I'm compiling a report now, Ms. Perry, for you from 2007 to 2024 to show you the major projects in flood protection that we've done. And we'll do it by year. but we'll show some overlaps. Projects don't happen in 1 year, Mr. Yes, right? It's not how it works. So we're gonna try to give you a big snapshot. We'll break down some Spark projects, non-Spark. I'm gonna go through that rating system I told you about how we rate it. I think you're gonna be shocked to see how much money was spent on it over that time, particularly in District 3. You need to know that, because I know you probably get beat up about it. I want to remind all the council members who maybe don't know this. You know, a drainage project is not going to be as sexy as an economic development project that brings a bunch of jobs and everybody's all excited and high-fiving and smoking the cigars. But in most cases, it's just as important, and in some cases, more important, because you're not going to get the economic development project if your infrastructure is failing. And so while people know that, if they talk to you about groundwater, if they talk to you about flooding, if they talk to you about other mitigation that needs to happen with water diversion or any other subject, they know that inherently. They know they want their trash picked up. But really, we think about in terms of when the ribbon is cut, you want to see the project open in a new building with the private sector creating jobs, et cetera. They go hand in hand. You've got to have infrastructure. We have infrastructure challenges, Mr. Canala, right? And we have big ones coming. And West Alexandria is going to have quite a few as it moves out that way. And there are things that have to be cinched up comparably in District 3. At that end by Sugar House, we've got to think about how, if there's going to be real growth there, what we do. And I think there's some more fixes in Gary's district at the back of Martin Park that are fairly straightforward. Mr. Cannell's outlining some new ideas to take care of some things that I think we've been talking about quite frankly too long. And so if you think of those corners, those are some places where you're going to see that need for infrastructure. We also adopted those cleanouts. 1.0 I did previously and 2.0 this time. I know most of you think those aren't unique or special projects. They are. You clean out all the infrastructure at once. That's normally purely operating money. Mr. Crutchfield left, but when he was here working with us before, we went through no small exercise to get that declared a capital project because of its size, use of equipment, et cetera. Mr. Johnson, excuse me, you were definitely a part of that. It was normally, you couldn't do that. You wouldn't be able to spend capital money. You couldn't do a project that big. It'd have to be a series of small ones, which would not have helped us because we needed the immensity of it to make a huge difference. So you can't do it all the time because that would be gaming the operation side. You have to be careful. It has to be declared. We've done the hard work to figure that out. Can't say every city has, but we did it, and they made a difference. And no matter what, I know personally for sure that from 2007 to 2024, the diversion, the movement of water, and what is happening in the city is better than when I started. I know it for a fact. I know places that used to flood anytime that don't at all, but I also see some new things. So that tells me there are new things happening. But I've always taken that seriously. We did a bunch of reports after Gustav. Mr. Giss, we wrote a full report after Gustav and commented on every single thing that was right or wrong with it. We did again after a big storm several more times, all of the different things. It would drive us crazy to know that you have a home and be susceptible in a short burst of high volume rain to have that problem happen. It'd be shocking. Mr. Fowler, you had quite a few people affected. Gary certainly did in his district too. Cynthia still is plagued, especially around West Sandy and some areas that just are low. They're in an area that is going to, if it flooded before, it can flood again. We have mitigated so many of those. Went over them the other day. I can show you the 3 or 4 areas of the city that you can't mitigate out of. And so we need to think about, stop telling people there's some project that will help them and think about it a different way. Because you can't mitigate out of being in a bowl. On the call, let me say that a different way. Mr. Dolly, you can't beat Mother Nature. You could mitigate it, but the cost to mitigate it would not be fair to a single other taxpayer because the amount of tax dollars to mitigate the 3 to 4 houses it would mitigate would be unfair to the rest of the city in the allocation of a scarce resource. Why would you do that? You'd be better off buying them out of that house than spending, why would you spend $1 million to fix a $250,000 issue? Why would you spend $10 million to fix a $250,000? You would not do it. We do it in your life, and we certainly shouldn't do it with people's tax dollars. Now, I say that because you guys get that pressure. More than anybody, you get it at the council level. Why can't you do this? Why can't you fix this road? Why don't you pave this? Well, there's one house on it. So is it $1 million road for one house? $1 million a road is not, it's $1 million for a section, you know? You've got to weigh those things. I want y'all to be the eyes and ears too, because I still think I know all my choke points. I go out in the storms and still look. They look the same to me, but there could be new stuff that I'm not seeing. There's always some weird ones that there could be a blockage. I can never remember the name. Charlton Street is, you come off of MacArthur to go to Jackson, right at the overpass. So you're coming toward what used to be the North Circle side, right? You divert down Charleston, be that first street before the shopping center, before you come to Jackson. It goes way down. You'd be shocked. You're going off a cliff if you turn down. So I don't see it flood like. To me, visually, it looks like it ought to be underwater when there's any rain at all. But I've seen it underwater. So we learned once that there was a whole blockage underneath MacArthur Drive. There was a whole drainage system, Mr. Cannella, that you state people were not cleaning and not taking care of. We didn't know it. And we made, I think Mr. Marcotte or somebody, he wasn't utilities director, then I think you were, before you left to the state. They got under there with the robotic camera and found all of that. And when it got cleaned out, lo and behold, there weren't a lot of problems. Those things can exist, Ms. Berry, in what we would call, I guess, really some forgotten infrastructure. It gets blocked off and it's off a map. So a new map comes out of where everything is and somehow it's forgotten. It's not recorded anymore. We have that in the city. This is an older city. There's things like that. So please let us know when that happens. And I'll finally touch on groundwater a little because it remains a topic for everybody. There's no question the city has brown water from time to time. I have told you over and over, I have had it at my house. I've not had it this year. I did not have it toward the end of last year, but at the beginning of 2024, often. We continue to think that is because of old infrastructure where you have a lot of sediment settle. And then when we flush pipes, which we have to do to get that fire rating 1, remember the law of unintended consequences. We delivered you a fire rating 1, never before happened in the history of the city, helps you with your insurance, but you got to do a lot of flushing to maintain that. Well, when the flushing occurs, the settlement comes. And so at first it's going to hit, especially in lower areas where there have been problems, but not only, it could be anywhere. Typically, brown water is not dangerous. It's an aesthetic issue. It looks bad, it's gross, it can have a smell sometimes, it can be badly or mentally smelling, etc. But it can be too much. Don't let me suggest that there's nothing wrong with it. Report it. We have to chase it. It's the only way we're going to figure out where it is. There's a fancy name for it where you have to move around opening and shutting things until you finally figure it out. But this is old infrastructure. Now, let me tell you the part that you don't want to hear and your constituents don't want to hear. The vast majority of it is in all likelihood, not for sure, but likely, more probably than not, on the customer side. Meaning it's the customer's pipes that are old, galvanized, et cetera, and things fall off, they shave off, and you see that at your house. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. The city cannot work on the customer side of the meter. We cannot. I hear people all the time, well, y'all need to go and change everybody's pipes. A, we can't, and B, we would be broke if we did that. There's no way we can go to every private house and do it.
And jail.
And jail. You could go to jail. But there are programs about that, so we need people to continue to tell us. But we can't go fix and replace everybody's pipes. That is not to say that there's not a lot of city infrastructure called into it. There is. I know that there is. All right, questions on flood control and protective infrastructure for water diversion? Did you know? Okay. Good. All right, public safety updates. KLB had a question first. People concerned about some of the shopping. By the way, KLB sent this in compliance with the policy ahead of time. I relaxed it this year instead of having it a day in advance. I said, since there weren't any questions coming, how about an hour before? I got this when I walked down, but I'm going to answer. People are concerned about some of the shopping areas in the city after Academy had two shooting incidents. What safety measures are being taken for that area? Is the chief here? Come on, chief. John, you want to put on the spot? So let's first identify the two incidents with KLB to make sure we're on the same page, and I think that's important to do. I'm assuming it is the incident that involved the juvenile, the first one, and we'll unpack that a bit, we have a little bit, and then the second one was the most recent. The juvenile event, which we have reported on extensively from here, but we're happy to do it again. We don't name names, we don't go too far into it. I see the commissioner in the audience. We've talked a lot about it. Those are fraught issues. There's a family involved, and there's other things that went along with that. If you can imagine a young person doing that, you ought to be thinking about some of the things that can lead to that. I wouldn't jump to just conclusions about what is obvious. It's that there's a lot of things that went around. A person could have, I'm not saying in this case, but a person could have mental illness, addiction issues, or both. There could be, other than mental illness, there could be an incident-driven situation. There could be bullying in school, there could be lots of different things. In that incident, a young person went to Academy, to the area where weapons or bullets, I guess, are sold or kept, correct? Yes, sir. Okay. And so in this second incident, it also occurred to do with weapons or bullets or guns, right? That's correct. Okay. So KLB's first answer should be self-evident if any investigation is done on their part. Both are at Academy in this case, which I think is relevant to their question because it's one place. So that makes the first click in your head go, one spot has had it twice. Yes, one private business that sells guns and bullets has had an issue 2 times where within that store they sell guns and bullets. Is it the policy of the city that the city secures the inside of a private business? No. I would say the first question should be some reporting that goes toward the policies of what? Okay. Yeah. To suggest that somehow the city is kind of what's wrong with what's happening. That's not the city. However, to the extent that the city provides officers who are off-duty protection for the security. So now let's not assume Academy did anything wrong. Can't control how KLB chooses to edit this later, but we'll all get to see. Right? Won't stop what it does if it does damage, but we'll get to see it. Let's assume Academy did it all the way. They hired all the right people. They're all there, and it still happens. I would think that the first thing you'd want to do is you'd have people in that area beefed up more than anywhere else. But I do think that's not enough. It's about securing the store. We're going to have to rethink this. Why is it happening at one store? In the case of the first incident, I only am constrained by the fact that it doesn't change my ability to talk because it's a minor. I feel so constrained. I've told the chief we need to not be as worried about it if somebody's going to take action, but I also want to respect that it's a minor. I'd love to say more on that. I really would, because I think that's the one to unpack for you, which I think we've done as careful as we could do in at least one, if not 2 meetings here, I think. but I think would be the most instructive as to the issue. Anyway, that child then went off in the parent's vehicle, which I think was taken without permission, ended up flipping the vehicle. It was a mess. It was a mess. But it also illustrates exactly what the police are not tasked with preventing. How could anyone know that that child was going to do that day? Where would that best be known? Where would the prevention of that start? That couldn't be. The police would have no way of knowing that. That's why I think the question is a bit loaded in that way. Just wouldn't have, that's not how it works. In this case, I think that a person went in, perhaps wasn't going to get a super dangerous weapon. Maybe it was a different type of weapon, but nonetheless, to an officer, a BB pistol pointed at you in a split second of something looks like what? I mean, it's just not how it works. And so that's not what happened here, by the way. There was a different situation where folks were wrestling for control and there was a shooting. That was not our officers. That was an off-duty deputy working the academy at that point. But I think our officers do work academy or higher to the top.
We have in the past, yes, sir.
So it was a deputy. When that happened, the sheriff's department will look to, it's got an agreement, I believe, with multiple agencies to conduct its own shooting investigations. That will occur there. I would suggest that KLB ask them that. But there's nothing wrong with KLB asking us what the city should be doing or thinking about in terms of academy. And I think, in fairness to Colin on that question does matter. That's why I said it to you guys. It has happened twice at or around the counter of that, and we do, while the city doesn't dictate the policy in the store, certainly there's a lot of thought about talking with different businesses about what the expectations are to keep people safe. I'm not one to jump to a causative situation when you only have a correlation, so forth. Let me say it that way. And I think the media has dropped that in modern times. Things that are caused are different from just two things are coincidental, and it doesn't not a pattern yet make. But I do think it's fair to say 2 incidents at or around that counter, someone needs to think about it. And if you look at other stores and it's not happening the same way, then someone, again, those are all things in the pattern that one should consider. If there are policies at stores to not arrest or interdict any misdemeanor situations with regard to stolen material, bullets, et cetera, those are all policies that, while I don't know if they're occurring, should be considered. Back the interest of the council and its authority. That is not authority for me, but that is authority to think about from a council standpoint. Required security if you sell guns, et cetera. Now, here's what you're going to run into. Reddick's talked about this. He ran into a little statute that preempts everything and then some. Anything that touches upon the regulation of the possession of guns and bullets in our state, you can't make the laws around. So if you're going to address this, you're going to have to do it very carefully. But it certainly is not a Second Amendment war, ladies and gentlemen, at all. This is a question of having security around a facility that conducts a certain business that increases its risk. It is no different than requiring at events, which we're going to talk about. If you're having a run at the city, you're going to have security. Maybe you didn't used to, you're not going to like it. It's going to take some money from the fundraising you're doing, but it's required. So there are going to be increased costs of public safety to private sector things that are a consequence of where we are as a society and where we are as a city and not being able to afford to deal with it as we used to. If I had to tell Colin something that I guess in the age and time we are now that he wouldn't have grown up or known the same as maybe when I was a young guy, the city would handle all kinds of events like this by having a zone covered, and just 2 zone guys would peel off and cover a run or an event or whatever. But as we get a lot of that, Cynthia, we get a lot of people going, but just a few years ago, you didn't charge us to do that. Well, you would just do it. Just a few years ago, we did not have the dearth of available officers to cover our zones that you can't get from any other agency or other city, because every city and agency has this problem. So it is a manpower issue. I can't tell you how many things that I'm asked to review on commentary and social media where people are like, and I have people bring me to review legitimate questions. What do you think about this question? Why don't we just add police officers? Guys, you're gonna read that all day long. Add a cop. Where? From where? They're tired, they have to work. Chief, tell us what your thoughts are about the two events at Academy, because I want to make sure that we're not leaving something out. The question was very straightforward, just what the concerns are and what measures are being taken. I think I gave an answer about the measures, but maybe there's other things you feel we should take.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Mayor. You know, certainly, some of it fall back to Academy, but these two incidents were totally.
Well, I didn't say that, you did.
Totally unrelated. And obviously, I like the mayor, and gonna respect, and I'm bound by law not to release, names and whatnot of the juvenile. And I think it's also important to say, because, there has been a lot of commentary on, the police department was chasing the juvenile, and we were never chasing the juvenile. The juvenile happened to wreck, and crash out. But, you know, these.
Can I stop? Sure. So this is, Commissioner, this is an unpacked moment too. Most cities have adopted a policy of no chase on misdemeanor. We've had officers disciplined for it because of the hybridized policy we have. So a misdemeanor chase that results from a situation that leads to felonious activity. I mean, where's that line? I just want y'all to think about it. So someone takes off and it's only a misdemeanor chase, so the police officer is not supposed to give chase back because it could lead to a wreck and a death over a misdemeanor. I get it, but is it specific to the type of misdemeanor? That is one that's escalatory in nature, that could lead to a felony? Those are tough lines for them. But you know, I want you to think about the bigger issue that question begs. Think about where we are, where we have to adopt that policy in the first place. What are all the surrounding reasons for that adoption? Is it a dearth of officers? Yep. Is it proliferation of litigation and activity that is unfair? Yes. Is it also to do with, hate to say it, bad policing and other things that occur? Yes. All of these things are happening in combination that lead to that policy having to be adopted.
Or could there be bad persons? No, we're not chasing them for that, they keep on going.
Mr. Blard, that's a very astute point.
And I'm saying it right here.
The folks that are doing this, they know some of those lines, and they know that we will not give chase on certain things. They exploit them. So if you know that as an officer, should that matter?
And you know, just like the way we do SWAT operations today versus the way that did them 20 years ago, our tactics have changed, and obviously I think they've changed for the better. Why are we going to chase someone 100 miles an hour down MacArthur Drive, you know, for that misdemeanor or for a traffic offense, when a lot of times we know who it is and get a warrant. Certainly through neighborhoods, it's just not, the outcome does not outweigh or the risk that's there. So
That's a great.
I am very, very concerned about it. We have implemented some pretty good policy, I believe, with the department. Although, you know, our guys are committed and they want to do these things because they're driven to do this. It's just not a practice we should be in.
So that's why I'm glad I had you come up. You corrected, I was looking at it in one line of thought, not necessarily that you should do it, but just talking about the risk side of it, of why it can be bad that you have the policy. You're actually highlighting a lot of the sensible part of it the other way, which is in many cases, officers back in the day would know that's Jimmy, and they would give chase, and there could be a car wreck. Well, that would be crazy if you knew it was him, it was a misdemeanor, right? And you knew who it was, and you gave chase through a neighborhood and someone died. That would never make sense in cost benefit. And that is a new thought about policing, because in the olden days, the real thought was you commit a crime, you go till you make an arrest. That was the rule. Basically, until it's cleared by arrest, that if you're in hot pursuit or you see it happen until it's cleared by that arrest, you're free to do it. But that really makes no sense if we grow as a society and evolve, and that's how I really appreciate it.
So, and, you know, back to the question, Mayor, at the Academy, like I said, both of them are two completely different. I think they're random acts. You know, I don't want to comment much on the event that occurred last weekend, because the sheriff's office and the Central Louisiana critical incident is investigating that. But,
Well, in fairness, Kelby, I think their question is, what should we be doing? Forget who's, I don't think their question was geared to any kind of who's responsible for the altercation itself, but what is it, is there something unique about that we got 2 incidents in less than 2 full years of that?
I don't think there's anything unique about that. I think that we're doing what we can. I mean, and what we're charged to do, like you said, what point is it that, you know, when is private sector, let's just say private sector as a whole, you know, they take some responsibility in this too. And listen, I want to say this too. Academy had worked very well with us, and we, in the past 2 years, we've talked to their management about things that have happened there and thefts that have occurred. And they have worked very well with us to minimize those thefts, to make it harder to get ammunition that supplies illegal firearms in the city. And I as the police chief, I am grateful that they've worked with us.
None of the policymaking we talked about impinges upon any of the robust Second Amendment rights.
No, sir. We're absolutely
The
not.
things we talked about is the access to those
That's right.
dangerous weapons in there that they go and be caged up a little different.
Which are obtained illegally, not something that the Second Amendment that's obtained illegally.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's pretty exhaustive on the question. I don't know what we'd recommend to the council. I have some ideas about that legislation that Reddix has started talking about in moving it out of anything with touch of possession. But, you know, I would venture to say we would take a beating about anything that is perceived as an attack on adding a cost of doing business to the private sector. So I'm trying to be mindful of that, but people also in the private sector need to know that it's also a cost to the rest of the private sector to have law enforcement focused on only certain industries unfairly in a greater amount than they're supposed to do than everybody. And we get a lot of requests like that, Chief. Well, I have this certain thing in this certain neighborhood. I really need y'all to patrol more here. Well, that sounds great. And again, back in the day when we had every zone where nobody cared and overtime was plentiful and it didn't matter, you could just say, hey, Stephen, y'all peel off and add 2 hours here. That's not how it works today. So it becomes part of the cost of doing business, and that is a terrible thing. But these things are not done in a vacuum. We face the reality of that shortage. And so if someone says, and I got a letter this week, I need you to beef up this street with a full police presence to stop these speeders on this street. Back in the day, you would pull that out the zone and go run a little program on that street. Does it mean that we don't watch speeders anymore? No. But to ask for 2 officers to go work that specifically is a different question. The next question will be add speed bumps. Equally a bad idea. Destroys our emergency equipment. So some of this is about, in some cases, the business sector as a part of doing business, and in most cases, all of us as people living at home needing to police our streets. And here I'm going to come to the speed part. If I were to go send that unit detail out there to look at who's speeding on that street, for the complainant on that street, who do you think will be speeding on the street? Just take a walk. Huh? The people who live on that street will be the ones doing it. And I know there are thoroughfares where there are drive-throughs, but statistically speaking, measurably so, materially so, substantively so, substantially so, it will be someone at or near that area. Recently, we had a lady write about that. I say recently. I heard it recently. I think it was
Several months ago.
several months ago. Made a complaint, wrote you,
Yes, sir, wrote up, well, our traffic division.
and made a complaint. And so they went out. And who was the first stop?
The lady that wrote the letter.
Colin's definitely making a public records request to get that letter. This poor lady, she's gonna be all over TV. They're gonna run a terribly negative story on the city. Somehow it's our fault that that happened. Right?
He shakes his head about it.
No, good. Thank you, Colin. So anyway, but that's a reality. Does that make a pattern yet or a stack? Because no, but that's a very good indicator of how it works. All right, so for public safety, we're gonna check, the chief and I, and commissioner, and also fire will be announcing a lot about hardening of assets. And we will be working directly with the council on that. Festivals, schools in the city, there was recently a series done at KLD about schools. I have not seen it. I asked the chief to watch it and give me a report on it. He's not done so yet. So I don't know the thrust of it or how it was couched. But we have schools in the city. It's our responsibility to respond. We think we particularly train about that and actually want to become a leader of that and create schooling around that. I don't know if the lead of the story was some comparison that I only saw that social media reacted that way. I don't know if that happened in it, some parents. I have zero idea that occurred.
But just to echo what you said.
Uvalde did constitute a series of terrible mistakes when it comes to active shooting. Let there be no doubt about that. Terrible mistakes. Refusals of duty under the active shooting doctrine. I have seen otherwise with my APD, and I know otherwise. So I'm following on that. Yes, sir.
I'll just echo what you said, and I'm very confident in myself and the officers I work with that the way we would respond there would be 100% all in. We would run absolutely to that, because that's what you do, that's what you train to do. And just to echo what you said, Mayor, the training that goes on at APD and in the academy that we teach is
Which includes all other agencies in there.
state of the art. We don't just teach it one time, we continue to look at it. Our SWAT commander is constant, and our academy staff is constantly reviewing that, looking for best practices and how we need to better ourselves every day. You never stop learning for things like this. And so, obviously, children are near and dear to my heart, made a career working with kids, and I think every police officer that I work with would say the same. We would handle it to where we run to it, not away from it. And I think that the parents of those in Rapides Parish and in Alexandria, where your children go to school, can rest assured that the Alexandria Police Department will respond hands down, along with our other partners, state police and the sheriff.
I think everybody.
We're 100% committed to protecting our children in school.
But you would agree with me that while you and I both have no doubt in who would run toward the danger, there's always room for the tabletop and the exercise to make sure the coordination and the interoperability of that plan goes, because that can be the negative too, right? In that you're not willing and brave, it's does the interoperability work to maximize that?
Absolutely. And it's something we fear. You and I have talked about it. I've talked about it with officers, I hope we never see it. Hope we never experience that nightmare here. But we all know that it's a possibility, and I think we prepare as best we can every day. That next call could be it. It really could.
Look, the Academy event was not that, but if you have, those kind of events and that can be the event where that goes to the next level with that. You have to assume that these things are faced in any community. That's the only way you can look at it. It's as horrible and grim as that is. That's the reality. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about hardening of assets. I've asked you over the last 2 days, particularly today, we've given it a year and a half on our media policy. We're talking about thinking through some new things with our media partners on when we ask them to convert to some kind of help in any kind of catastrophic event, to make sure that seamless how we're gonna handle that, down to, more like it used to be, but I feel like, they're gonna think we're being, arrogant or haughty when I say this, but for it to be that way, media has to also learn how it used to be, meaning the rules of engagement about embargo and those kind of things. So if there's an allowed embed in the situation so that you're getting real-time information, you have to agree to the embargo to not put officers in harm's way. And if we can get some of that agreed to, then the First Amendment rights are fully actualized, and so are the protection to our officers. I know you've had conversations with members of the media who have said, look, my role is only to get the information to the public, and it's to get it first in any way I can regardless. And while that may offend you as an officer, and I'm sure it does, on the First Amendment side, that's a belief that can be strongly held. It can be strongly held. And so I don't believe they're mutually exclusive. I just believe that sometimes there has to be a way in which you do something so that the media and the public are getting the watchdog part they want, but they may not be able to show it when they want. Now, that's a challenge because everyone's got a camera today. I'm not for, personally, a lot of the changes in the rules. I'm not sure. I'm not going to weigh in yet on 25, whatever that rule is about coming upon an officer. I have some thoughts I've reserved for another day, but in general, I think those are going to get stricter in favor of officers in the current administration. And so I'm not saying I would go with all of what I suspect is coming. But as a police officer, you probably would. That's understandable. I think, again, we can do better and think about that, but we've got to come to a different set of terms with our media partners about how things work. And it's a new age. Their pressure is to be first in a whole different way because the whole world can be first with the way carrying the phone around is set up, but it doesn't make it right. And it shouldn't ever involve increased or undue influence on the situation that allows either officers to be killed or the public be victims to something. So showing something in real time that allows the bad guy or the bad girl to see it in real time and change their game to hurt more people is absolutely not what was thought by a founder or anybody else about the First Amendment. That's not the point. Now, I hope that you and I can lead on this with the commissioner and others. I think we have some particular knowledge about how to do it. I don't know if the meeting will listen. They may not care to listen, not care, but to listen to them because they may feel it violates what they want and how they want to do it. But there was a time, Mr. Fowler, when that would be a normal occurrence. You will get this, you will get it in real time, you agree to embargo it until this moment so that we keep people safe. And that was routinely done and honored with a handshake. And so one of my ideas about that is, if we do that, you can have another part of the media segregate off and they can say, we don't agree, we're covering what we want in real time, but one person gets to embed and say, I'm willing to do the other part to get the deeper story. If they're building a long story or not, I'm willing to do that. And my first talk is going to be, and may surprise some of you, with Mr. Jack Ent, who's sitting here. I want to talk to him about that personally. I want to get his thoughts about it because he was not a part of traditional media and was not part of organized media. And some of you will disagree and say you shouldn't. And I noticed somebody, we all have to take the risks that we have to take to make our community better and figure out how to serve people better. That has to include all of us rethinking how we do things too. Because let me just say what ain't working. What's happening right now is not working. It's not working. It's not good for the community. So that'll be coming up, particularly from the most grim and avoided talk about a school and our children guys, it's the festivals and all these other events. We're going to have partners on how this occurs. And the people who hold these events, we're gonna have to rethink how this occurs. And so there's gonna have to be a lot more partnering. Right now, there's a run every week, and we get a request about it. There's barricades and police officers that are gonna have to be made available. We're gonna have to rethink how many runs can occur in a month, right? Okay. I want to make sure I make a couple more comments about New Orleans, and then I'll be done with this. Listen, first of all, what happened in New Orleans was terrible. It's a tragedy at any proportion that is the worst you can imagine. Every family, and it touched families here, by the way. There were people, that event touched people in Alexandria for sure. I'm positive I personally know that. Nothing I'm about to say should diminish what they're going through or desire of New Orleans to make right, meaning failures at many levels. I just want to clarify and amplify what I talked about the other day about how you can't let that fiction live in your head, that fixing the situation there would avoid a different event there or anywhere else. See, my commissioner nodding his head, we're just so aware of that. So what we worry about is what a disservice that does to anybody at home or elsewhere that you would think that preventing that one instance on Bergen Street was somehow a panacea or universal solution elsewhere, right? So I don't want to seem callous. Those families rightfully will look at that event and see that there was at least preliminarily a 2019 report and study that said what should have been hardened. They will then, the lawyer, will easily look and say it wasn't done. And they will then look and say, you set up a duty to do it, you didn't do it. And it approximately, directly, causatively led to the situation. I'm not talking about that. That is what it is. I'm talking about if it weren't that event, could someone take off down Canal Street right now with law enforcement set up as it is right now and just take the sidewalk and do damage? Could that happen in Alexandria right now? New Orleans is different because there's so many more people that are walking around, et cetera. But could any of it, could you circle around the corner a different way? And we've talked in staff and in our exercise about how easily it could have been done differently and more. Even that event, that's the fiction I'm talking about. Is the idea that the 2019 report would fix all the challenges that come with it. To harden these things would be impossible. It's just like fixing all the infrastructure and any other thing. You could never stop every event. I know we don't know. You could never stop every event, right? You couldn't do it. But like the 2019 report, when we know we're having an event where we are inviting people to come be a part of that event, you better bet the duty is increased on us. And we will have to think about how to do it. So when council members hear we can't handle that event and we're pressured or say, but y'all had an event like this at this time or that, there are going to be some no's that come from our internal ability to put on certain things. And I hope it doesn't mean that every time we have to come in front of the council and unpack security measures that we won't be doing every time. No. Now, limited resources we'll have to deal with in limited ways. I'm finishing on this utility issue that has to do with the major budget amendment. I gave y'all a report on it. Our ranking in the last several months, it should be in these reports. I'll get them from August, October. Thank you, Chief. We were running 1 and 2 lowest, Alexandria's electric utility. We're now still in that same top third quartile. We dropped a couple spots. There's some fuel cost issues. We gave you the report at budget, major budget amendment about what we return to the citizens. Millions of dollars from direct changes in practice here. And so that led to savings. And that is an important thing that we need to keep harping on and going over and stop the madness of destroying this utility, which is one of the most important assets we have. KLB asked me to answer this, so I'm gonna read it and we can talk about it, and that'll be our final thing. A woman contacted KLB recently about having estimated amounts on a utility bill in Alexandria. So I'm gonna keep reading, but right there, red flags or bells go off in my head. This is not how reporting is done in the way I grew up. And it shouldn't be done. A woman contacted KLB, okay, fine, an anonymous source, as to us. If KLB has the name of that person, they should make a request and get her billing history. That's a minimum that should be done before we have to answer the negative. Prove a negative, right? Anyone can say anything. So there's no way for us to rebut or do anything. But it continues the falsity of so many of these cases where I've been asked to review it or have someone review it and report. And I told y'all the percent last time. Of all the tens upon tens that allegedly, that I get from council members, I'll ask, and two of the council members are now gone and won't be able to do it, but I've got a few in here. Have any of you had one that complained to you turn out to be true? You don't have to voice it out loud, but you can nod to them.
Being that over.
No, since let's say last year. Okay. So that's a problem, because if someone says something over and over, you can call it primacy effect, or if it's the last thing said, recency effect. But no matter how many times KLB reports this, it will never make it true. And no matter how many times they interview someone to say it, but don't do the follow-up work of just figuring out if it's true or not, which is very easy to do, it doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it true. When I came in, we were millions of dollars in the hole. The utility was on the verge of catastrophic failure. All of it fixed. Back to the top of the goods chart of one of the lowest in the state, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, never reported on, never. By any of these guys, that is never reported on. But that's a fact done by auditors and third-party sources that we have no control of. In that time period, restored the utility back and are providing to our customers a lower fuel cost, the only thing that's a pass-through. Haven't changed a rate since 1986 to their negative. Never reported on, not once. Also never reported on by any of the media, particularly KLB, is to go make a comparison to other utilities and ask the same questions and do the same thing. It's easy to pick on the city because there's elected officials. But you know what's easier, and I don't like it because I think it's wrong for the stations, but all their records are public records, which again, I don't really like. But if you're gonna say on social media and to the media that X has happened to you, and you're gonna go to the media where you've waived your privacy rights in it anyway, you're saying it's true, then follow up and see if it's true. That was my first sentence. I'm not through with it. You ready for the next one? She conserves her electricity and tries to keep it around $70 to $80. And yet her bill shot up almost $200 as an estimated amount. That is a problem. I don't disagree that that might not be true. I don't know if she thinks it's conserved or that she was estimated more than once. I don't know who this person is. This is not about the person. It's about KLB's report. This is not about you at home. If you have an issue, come see us tomorrow and we'll unpack your bill and we won't have to tell anybody and figure out if something happened to you. That'd be the first thing I'd ask is, you went to KLB, they have nothing to do with your bill. Did you go to the city yet? It's comical. Did you figure out yet? So KLB would have people believe that the reason people won't do that is they feel the city will retaliate against them. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's something wrong with your bill, it's easy to figure out. It's just that of all these bills that I've seen reviewed and that the council has brought to our attention, they always carry a giant past due balance, which no one wants to talk about. Because only the city gives people the leeway to have large past due balances. And yet, we were able to return us back, recoup and save this utility and do all those things. This ought to be a positive story about our city. Our utilities progress should get a series of positive stories and how it can make a difference in businesses' lives and offer them an opportunity if they grow a business in certain areas or of a certain size or of a certain expenditure of capital materials. Instead, it's routinely attacked with the least amount of substance at all, which is, I said it, therefore it's true. I don't even have to back it up with anything. I have a call. This is, and then it follows up with this. This is just one example of the many emails and calls we receive from the public with concerns about their utility bills. Why is this still happening? I can answer that, and that's the easiest one. Because you keep running stories that mislead the public. That's why it's still happening. Because you keep making an availability of people to call and not have a consequence whether it's accurate or not. We are willing to set up, if need be, a separate firm at your selection, accounting firm, to hide from ourselves the information and let you review it in secret, and we bet it will prove our point.
It's all public record anyway.
But it's all public record. But when that was pointed out before, then KLB ran a story, so the city gets it either way, that we were trying to expose people's public record. So we can't, you see, it's a trap, because the real story will never let you out of the headlock. But it's also easy to discern. Take the person who's called, and it is very possible that there's an estimation or a catch-up or something else. It's also possible, Colin and KLB, that the city made a mistake. That's possible too. It's very possible that the city made a mistake. And if it did, it will correct it. But it can't be corrected by KLB because they have no ability to correct the billing issue. What can be corrected is if someone calls and shows that they have a problem, it can be corrected. I would just suggest to you to think about that there's a utility bill in a city in modern 2025 America that someone is admitting they can keep the $70 or $80 a month. You know what that means? That means their whole bill, because we're talking about Alexandria, remember, that's not just electric. That means someone's entire utility bill is $70 to $80. I guess KLB missed that part of the story. That someone's bill would even go to $200 for all utilities in a month. Now, if it's 70 to 80, that's a problem. But if you have a bill that's 70 to 80 every month, that's pretty good. So we don't think that there's things happening by any organized or wrongdoing of the city. We just think that there are issues that happen with utility bills. There are issues with rules about reading. There's a dog, there gets to be a dog code. Then there's no dog. Someone gets estimated over and over. After there's no dog or gate, it's still being coded that way. And some worker for the city doesn't do the job properly, doesn't fix that. Does that happen? Yes, it happens. And if they're caught doing that, there's a consequence. But we can't ensure that never happens because it happens in every utility. It happens in every utility, not just Alexandria, all of them. What we can do differently, much differently than any other is because it's a public record, anyone can research if it's true or not. I hope that in this case, it is true. I actually do, because we'll be able to fix this person's problem and we'll finally be able to find one that we can hold up and go, bam, she was right and we fixed it. But the only way to do that is if they'll play ball and prove it. And then it's easy to do. But of the hundreds we've been challenged with, hundreds of claims that have been made on social media. All right. Questions about utility issues?
One thing that might be interesting to folks is the Public Service Commission just came out with a report on electrical service for the whole state that they regulated last year. And it's just about a 50-page document. Pretty interesting.
I just know that if the utility were allowed to function and was a supportive enterprise fund of the city, it would be better for us. It's an asset to us. And really, it's just getting old. The amount of misinformation is laziness. It's a laziness that is almost unconscionable at this point. We've unpacked it. We have, on our website, you can go look at an unpacking you'll never see from the utility, exactly how everything's calculated. And it's just so easy. Here's the account. You can go look at the history, see what was past due and what's not. Listen, some of you may have had, you've had them in the past. I have, again, like groundwater, I have had my utility bill wrong. One time, $50,000, it said in one. So I know there can be a misprint or something wrong. It happened to me. But of the many I personally reviewed, I didn't find them. All right, I see y'all shaking your feet. Feet on sleep, that's a really bad sign. Anything else? This was a big one, but it's the first of the year. All right, thank you very much. That's all about it. That's the whole thing we're talking about. NTSB? Yeah, that's it. Show you where it came from. Not in America. Which is actually. All right, this is the law. Or give it to them. There. There? Yeah, there.